Alright, so upon request I'm doing another short little tutorial video about creating scatterplots on the TI-84. If you have another Texas Instrument, it should be pretty similar. So the first step is that we want to create a scatterplot, which means I need to tell the calculator what my data is. So I go into Stat, and I want to create my list. So I'm going to go ahead and hit 1 for Edit, and then I want to create my X's in the first column and Y's in the second column. So I'm going to go over to the X column, and I'm just going to use the example from the notes, which is 2.4, 2.6, 2.8, 3.0, 3.2, 3.4, 3.6. And then my Y's, so I hit the right arrow, and my Y's are 38,320. 33,710, 28,280, 26,550, 25,530, 22,170, and 18,260. And again, I just look and make sure that it's matched up so I know I didn't skip any numbers. And then I want to look at the shape of this, so I need to say what kind of window do I need to look at for my X's and my Y's. So we can use from 2 to 4 for X, and from, let's just say 15,000 or 18,000 would be fine. I'll use 15,000 to 40,000. So I'm going to go into my window, and I'm going to change it from 2 to 4, leave X scale alone. My Y's, I said 15,000 to 40,000. Whoops. 40,000. Okay. Now I want to graph this, but if I hit graph right now, it'll be blank because I haven't turned on my scatter plot. Normally when we graph functions, we don't see scatter plots. So when I go into y equal, I need to go up and hit enter to turn my scatter plot on. Notice how it's highlighted now. So now when I graph it, those points will be visible. Now I'm thinking I must have made a typo on my window. See, I put 3 instead of 4. And I could tell that because the points were going off the screen. And now I can see all my points. Okay. Now if I want to find the function that best fits this line, I go back into Stat, over to Calculate. Now that looked like a line, so I'm going to use linear regression. Now we're used to seeing it mx plus b format, so I'm going to use the first linear regression. If you use the second one, you'll get the same exact function, but it'll give you the constant first and then the slope. Either way, you'll get the correct function. So I'll say my linear regression, and then I go down until I see calculate and hit enter, and it will give me my values. So this means y equals negative 15,358.92x plus 73,622.5. Now I have to write that down somewhere, or we can store it. So if I want to store this in my calculator, and this is a little bit complicated so I didn't do it in class, you can do second enter, and that puts in the linear regression for list 1 and 2, and then comma, and I want to store that as a function. So we're going to go into vars, it's a new button, which is variables. Go over to y variables. I want to save it as a function. Let's save it as function 1. So 1, 1. So now this tells me I'm doing the linear regression from list 1 and 2. That's my x's and y's. And I'm going to store it into my y1 function. Okay, and then if I hit enter, what that does is when I go into y equals, it stored that whole value into my function. Now, if we were doing this by hand, we would not put this many decimal places. It's not reasonable. But if I'm storing it directly, it's just going to give me a slightly different answer. So remember how I said a regression is already an estimate, so you'll just have a slightly different estimate, which is fine. Okay, and now if I want to graph it, if I hit graph, now I have that line because I have that in my function, and I can see that the line follows along and is very close to my data. So like we were saying in class, this is a very strong negative linear association. If I want to go back in and clear out my data, so I want to put in something new or something like that, I would go back into Stat. Option 4 is Clear List. So I would go down to 4, and then you have to tell it which lists to clear. So see how up here there's list 1, 2, 3. So second, list 1. If I also want to clear list 2, I put a comma. Second, list 2. Enter. And now if I go back in, they're gone. Which means that if I try to graph them, it'll give me an invalid dimension because I'm trying to graph nothing. So I have to go back into y equals, quit, y equals, and turn plot 1 off, unhighlight it. Notice we can also turn the graph off if I go over to highlight the equal sign. So I can keep that information there, but it won't graph. Okay, one of the other questions that I get is once I graph this data, how do I go back to viewing my graphs as a regular, around the origin? And this is what we had talked about a long time ago, is that anytime you're looking at a new graph and you want to see its shape, go back to Zoom Standard, which is option 6. Okay, and next class we'll be talking about some of these other zooms, zooming in and out, and then also zooming to fit, which is way down on the end of this list, which the calculator kind of takes a guess at what your window should be. Hopefully this is helpful. Let me know if you have questions. Please reach out or come to office hours.